Have you ever met someone and you just thought to yourself, there's something quirky about that person? I think some of you met those type of people at lunch. I once had a manager, and she would look at my presentations, put them into grayscale, and look for the minute alignment issues. I had another colleague that I used to work with and had the most awkward laugh, and I wasn't laughing at their jokes, I was more laughing at the laugh. I've even met people who have talked to their plants as if they were co-workers, literally giving them performance reviews based on how many leaves are grown each week. I share all this context because I am a self-confessed, quirky person. I'm going to take you back. You're nodding already. I haven't even said anything. I'm going to take you back and explain why. So years ago, about 15 years ago, I went backpacking across South America, and I had the most incredible time. It was quite a foreign experience at the time because I grew up in a place called North London called Tottenham. So not many of my friends could really connect to this experience. In fact, some of them warned that I may actually die. That's how foreign an experience it was to them. But I had this incredible journey where I started off in Peru. I did the 4-day Inca Trail, camped at the ancient city of Machu Picchu, went into Bolivia, experienced the salt flats, took these amazing perspective pictures. Hope we get some good pictures in today as well. Then went through the Amazon wetlands, the Pantanal in northern Brazil. First time on a horse, seeing anacondas literally in the water. Unforgettable experiences. Then ended off in Argentina, where I got the rich culture, of course, colorful housing and lovely steak and wine. But one of the things that really stuck with me at the time, actually two of the things that really stuck with me at the time, is that we have more in common as humanity than what divides us. And going to the edge of your comfort zone is often where your biggest leaps in learning actually occur. The second thing I learned in Bolivia was that I apparently looked like will.i.am. Because a young boy took a picture of me and called me will.i.am, and I smiled very proudly for that picture. But during that journey, I read a book that changed my life. That book was called Is Your Genius at Work? The 4 Questions to Ask by Dick Richards. The 4 questions that the book really poses, which is quite a workbook actually, but the 4 key questions were, what is your genius? Is your genius at work? What is your purpose? And is your purpose at work? I'll repeat it again because I can see some people writing furiously. What is your genius? Is your genius at work? What is your purpose? And is your purpose at work? Yes, you can take a picture of the book if you would like. But the reason that this book was sort of transformative at the time is because I'd never really done the introspective work to ask those questions about myself. What brings me energy? What drains my energy? What do I think I'm really good at? What am I not so good at? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What makes me come alive where I feel like I'm almost losing track of time? Like I'm losing time right now on stage. I hadn't asked those questions of myself at that time. And though I was only at the tender age of 22, it started to sow a seed in me of thinking, I got to know myself a little bit better. So during that whole experience in South America, I kept a journal, a physical journal. And I was writing every day, furiously, all of these experiences that I was having on this adventure. And like many of you, as soon as you get home with that journal or that notebook from work that you filled up, you become a professional hoarder. It goes into a desk somewhere, collects dust, and you actually never flick back through it again. Who can relate to that? I hope you're not going to do that with your notebooks that you've got here at summer school. So I said to myself, I need to change this system. And this is where the geeky side of me comes out. I became an analytical journaler. An analytical journaler. I created that word. It doesn't exist. I asked Claude. But essentially, I said, I can no longer operate in this paper journal. I want to be able to connect the dots and really understand myself a lot better over time. And for the last 11, 12 years, I've been keeping this analytical journal, which is basically a spreadsheet where I'm entering entries every day, creative entries. It could be a screenshot of feedback that I got on LinkedIn because people really enjoyed my talk. Or it could be me just writing about something that I experienced, like this lovely woman that I met over lunch here at the Academy Wales. But I'll put all sorts of entries in there, and then I'll categorize those entries. Like this was to do with work and business, or spirituality, or my family. And then I'll have subcategories. This was a win, this was a lesson, this was an action. And I don't know why you're giving me that look, because I did warn you that I'm a little bit quirky. So this is my journal. It's in a tool called Notion, okay? And this is evidence of my quirkiness. I can see some looking in awe, and I can see some looking shocked. And every 6 months, I'd go through this retrospective period of going through every single category and just asking myself, what went well, what didn't go so well, and what could I do differently? And that gave me the ability to start looking back and connecting the dots to understand myself. And I became more and more confident over time on answering that question around what is my genius? This concept of a genius, though, isn't new. We can date it back to Greek mythology. It was said during Greek mythology that a genius was almost like a spirit that lived within the walls of the houses that we lived in. And if you succeeded and you were victorious at a task, it was really down to your ability to connect with your genius. If you failed at a task, you just didn't connect as well as you could have to your genius. And it's quite refreshing when you think of that externality, so that actually we don't get too narcissistic or ego-driven when things go well, but we're not too harsh on ourselves being a critic when we fail. Socrates, the Greek philosopher, used to refer to his genius as an unseen mentor, like an invisible guide along the way. Again, recognizing there's not all down to him. He ain't all that. Prometheus, the Titan, was said to have snuck into Mount Olympus and stole a spark of fire, this genius, and gifted it to humanity, which gave us our drive for creativity, innovation, and invention. So you see, this concept of a genius has existed for many, many generations. But nowadays, we don't really see things through the same perspective. In fact, in this hyper-individualistic world that we live in, we think more about the fact that we're self-made, which is quite countercultural for me because I grew up with this value that it takes a village to raise a child. But it's such a strange adage that is, because we never talk about it takes a village to be a support network for an adult. I want to prove this, and I want to prove this with a volunteer. So would someone kindly join me here on stage? They don't know that I've planned this, you see, so they're panicking now about mics. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. Excellent. You can come to the pulpit because that mic works. Okay, hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
You get a bit closer. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Ooh, he likes the sound of his voice. I do too. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and my only prerequisite is that you answer with the first thing that comes to mind. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. Could you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Jeremiah Nweke. I'm a Nigerian. And then I work with an organization called Green Voices.
Called Young Voices?
Green Voices.
Green Voices?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. Second question. Can you introduce yourself without talking about your job title and where you work?
I'm an enthusiastic person.
I'm
an enthusiastic person.
Enthusiastic?
Yes.
Fantastic. I mean, you stood up and joined me on stage, so I believe that. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about you, because I see the lovely pants that you've got on today, these trousers.
Okay, so this is African.
Yeah, I can tell.
Thank you, you can tell, that's all.
That's it? Okay, fine. Okay, and my final question, what comes easy to you that's difficult to others?
What I just did now comes easy to me.
Ooh, coming up on stage. Yeah, a lot of people get a bit frightened by this. It's like as big as death for some people, so that's a big achievement. Thank you. I appreciate that. This is the part where I should have prizes like a handheld fan, which would be really useful right now for him. But thank you for joining me on stage. You see, those questions, even though they're simple, they're actually quite tricky to answer, isn't it? Introducing yourself without your job title and your work, what you do for work. And the reason is because our work identities have become so entwined with our personal identities. We're actually so used to it. We're on autopilot. We call it heuristics. It happens at the front of our frontal lobe, where automatically, this is who I am, this is what I would do for work. And as soon as we do that, we create distance between ourselves and others. Because now we've actually just created status. So we've created a power dynamic. So if I'm unemployed, how do I feel then you've introduced yourself in that way? The same is true as my career, actually. My background is that I was a venture capitalist investor. You were allowed to hiss at that. But what that meant was that, I deserve that. But what that meant was that entrepreneurs would often pitch to me. And when they would come to pitch to me, that power dynamic exists automatically because they feel like they almost come with their begging bowl to ask for funds. So I used to send them something called my personal user statement. I told you that I'm a bit of a geek. And that personal user statement or that personal user guide would share all these intricate details about who I am, my background, where I grew up, how I like to communicate, what I do when I'm stressed, what I'm really into, the kind of sectors that interest me, the kind of startups that I've invested in. But it gives them enough context to come into the conversation and to have human connection and conversation. So what I did with that document is I'm creating the conditions so that we can meet as people before we meet as workers. When we get into this world of work, sometimes complacency sits in instead of consistency over time because we get so used to what we do. And what we notice is that we can have good intentions with unintended consequences. I'll give you a demonstration. I'm in a meeting with you at work. And I'm yawning. I'm practically falling asleep. You could come out of that meeting and have a side conversation with someone else in that meeting and say, he was so rude, disengaged, I can't believe he was doing that in that meeting. Now we're going to replay that meeting again. But at the start of the meeting, you choose to have a check-in. Hey, how's everyone feeling coming into this meeting today? It's a Monday morning. Oh, to be honest, I'm a little bit tired. My son's had a fever all night. So I've just come in and I'm going to try my best to be present, but I'm really tired. I didn't get no sleep. What happened in that moment? You shifted your perspective because now you're empathetic because you have what? Context. But when we're on autopilot and back-to-back in meetings at work, what we lack is context. So the theme for this 4-day experience is this leadership spirit. I've shared a little bit about what it represents for me. This concept of your genius, for me, is my leadership spirit. I'm going to share a little bit later what I believe my leadership spirit is. But before I do that, I want all of you to take a moment to write down your definition of what a leadership spirit represents for you. This is the moment you can stop looking at me and start looking at your notebook. Fantastic. All right. Do we manage to write down a definition? Would anyone like to brave it and share their definition? No, not really. All right. Excellent. What did you have down? I'll repeat it, don't worry.
Creating space for others to grow psychologically.
Creating space for others to grow psychologically. That's his definition of having a leadership spirit. Who had something different to that?
Yeah, shall I do? Making connections, building relationships, and getting out your own way.
Interesting. All right, there is some consistency across what we're trying to describe here. It's interesting because I mentioned that this leadership spirit for me represents like your genius. Like, what is your genius? What is that thing about you? Is unique to you. But actually, a lot of the definitions we're getting is not necessarily your imprint that's unique to you, but more a broader definition of what we'd like it to represent for us. That's what I'm hearing from some of the playback, the psychological safety, the inclusion, the creation of the conditions so people can feel like they belong and therefore have a platform to do their best work. I'm getting a lot of that coming through in the definition. I'm going to take us down memory lane for a second. In our tables, in pairs, I want us to have a conversation about the best line manager you've ever had. The best line manager you've ever had. And I want you to answer 3 questions. What did they do? How did they make you feel? And what impact did they have on you? Okay? It's on the board. Your best line manager ever. I usually do this in threes, but I think we've got mostly 8 around tables, don't we? So we can do it in pairs. Didn't know whether that would work, but it did, so that's fantastic. Can we be honest for a moment? I just have a moment of honesty. Who spoke about the worst manager they had? Who snuck that in there? Yeah? Yeah? All right, I think we have some microphones on tables. I'd love to hear just some of the stories that were shared in terms of the favorite manager experiences. Oh, sorry, I thought you were grabbing the mic there. Would anyone like to share their experience of their favorite manager? Fantastic. Do you have a mic on your table? Can we pass one on from that? Perfect. Great collaboration and teamworking already.
I'm here for the Academy Wales because of my line manager. In fact, not my line manager, I would call her as a mentor. And ever since she stepped into my life totally changed.
Wow.
And I would say probably during my transition of coming from India to UK, it was COVID, but I really enjoyed taking that break by not working, and I tried to look around what are the other things.
And how did she make you feel?
Confident, and I was just talking to my friend John, so emotionally more intelligent and more, understanding.
And what were the things that she did?
Guidance, like when I asked her, like, what are the other things I can do which can open and allow me to progress to become a good leader, leading people. And I would say she just opened up all the pathways where I can learn from all of you.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Look,
Thank you.
You know, there's some famous Gallup research that quotes that the manager has a 70% variance on employee engagement, and that's an example of why. The problem is, it's a bit of a roll of the dice at the moment. Depending on who's your manager, depends on whether we can share stories and experiences like what you just shared. Who else wants to share a manager experience? That was a humble hand. Just about saw that. Do you have a mic on your table? It's coming round. Thank you.
Thank you. My best manager, actually all of managers have been a blessing for me. I've had an excellent career journey so far, and all my managers have had very similar traits in the sense that they're very approachable, open, they kind of set the goal, but don't tell you how to do it. And as a leader, I think that's really effective way of developing your staff. So for me, I'm quirky like yourself. I like to explore, I like to challenge. So every time I've been set a goal, I've gone back and achieved higher than what's expected. And today I am the Deputy Lieutenant of Wells Glamorgan because I'm quirky like yourself.
Isn't it fascinating that no one is mentioning the tenure in leadership, the financial budgeting skills, the strategic mindset, or none of these technical skills? How good they are on ChatGPT? Everything people are mentioning are human skills. So what's leaving a lasting impact is the same thing that you feel about your favorite teachers in school. They were in my corner, they had my back, they were supportive, they stretched me in the right way to provide clarity in terms of career progression. They're approachable. What does that tell you about what it means to be a manager? It's being consistent and the things that leave a lasting memory. It's the things that they did, it's the feelings that they invoked in you, and actually it's the lasting impact it's left on you, which is why you both shared it with a smile on your face. Without mentioning their name, could someone give us an example of a bad manager? So what they did and how they made you feel. All right, so let's dial onto the first things that you were sharing. You were sharing authentic connection, empathy, essentially someone that meets you where you are. You know when we were growing up, did you ever hear this value growing up from your parents or your church or your local group? Treat people equally. But then nowadays, we talk about treat people how they want to be treated, which is going against treating people equal. There's a different value. And what we're talking about in his example, actually, in that timeless experience of management and how it's changed and evolved, is that we must also evolve. We can't be static while the world around us is changing. All of these geopolitical wars currently, 6 different generations in the workplace. That's what the World Economic Forum reported. 6 different generations. hybrid working post-COVID. We haven't actually fully figured that out. What is the renewed purpose for being in the office? I don't want to be in the office and just be on MS Teams and Zoom all day. Right? The emotional well-being of the individual. We didn't have to worry about it back in the factory line days where we were KPI-driven. Now people make decisions as to whether they're going to even join a company based on the diversity, inclusion, and well-being practices. So suddenly, this term of manager has morphed into so much it's almost unmanageable. It's a heavy weight. Heavy is the load. At the core of it, I want us to understand this concept. This is one of the things that you should write down and take away. How you feel impacts how you perform. There's a direct correlation. How you feel impacts how you perform. If I feel like my manager doesn't see me, doesn't value me, doesn't appreciate me, I'm going to come to work and do the bare minimum and probably apply to jobs as much as possible so I can get out. It's not necessarily a bad company, but sadly, I was put in with a bad manager. And therefore, I'm going to tell everyone not to join this company. It's a terrible place to work because that manager is the window into the organization. So if that window is dirty, suddenly it leaves a stain on my experience. The manager is the corporate influencer. Now, if that manager makes me feel seen, heard, valued, and supported consistently, suddenly I'm willing to do what you just said, go the extra mile. I look forward to going into work. I don't mind working late when I'm on that team because I get along with them and I know who they are as people. The difference in those two examples was nothing to do with the person's capability and their skills. It was all to do with how they feel. So sometimes we're misdiagnosing performance and linking high performance to capability when actually high performance is very intrinsically linked to how we feel. I'm on stage in front of you right now. If I was nervous and it wasn't so hot, I'd be sweating. I'd be struggling to get out my words. I'd be umming and ahhing all the time. And it will affect your experience of this, but it will also affect my experience of this. If I'm confident, I can control my pace, my tonality, how I project my voice, sneak in a little bit of humor. But the difference, again, isn't my skills or capability, it's just how I feel. If I'm nervous versus confident, so how I feel impacts how I perform. So I told you that story of that first time that I went backpacking, back when I was 21, 22. Oh, Andy, you look so young. You're too kind. But following that African proverb, go fast, go alone, go far, go together. I decided to take my younger brother this time, and we went camping across East Africa for 30 days. You see, this year marked a very significant birthday. It was the 100th birthday of my unseen mentor, one of them, Sir David Attenborough. I grew up loving immersing myself in his shows and National Geographic. I absolutely loved the natural environment. I was walking out sweating for no reason before this talk, just to be in nature. Why do I do that to myself? But the truth is I love it. So I had this experience where I went to Serengeti in Tanzania, camping for 30 days up and down East Africa. Started off in the Victoria Falls of Zimbabwe, working our way through Malawi, this incredible experience in wildlife. And we get to this nature plane where we have this guide who I called my tracker. And he was really quirky because he started looking at the floor, putting bits of dirt on his mouth, feeling the humidity in the air, and saying that the lions are feeding and having water right now. He would walk a little bit later, longer with us, take us meandering off the track, on the track, off the track, on the track, and get us to a waterhole and say, no, they've left about an hour ago. You see those birds over there? Can you hear them singing? I can hear them. It means nothing to me. What does it mean to you? It means actually that they're getting ready for a hunt. We need to go there now. And he had basically his whole life developed this ability to track animals in the wild. That journey of developing that is littered with failure. He must have failed so many times when doing that, taking different people on guides every single week for the last 20 years. But he's continued to learn from failure to be more intelligent when he does it next. We're not very comfortable about talking about this subject, are we, failure? right? But it's not really truly a failure from extracting lessons from it to move more intelligently going forward. It's not really a failure. There's 3 real lessons that I learned from following this tracker. The first is that as a leader, you must provide directional clarity. We call that vision sometimes. Annoyingly, you've got to reinforce that quite regularly. This is the direction that we're going in. This is the direction that we're going in. This is where we're going. Everybody, you know where we're going? Yeah, we're going there. Why are you working on that? Is that aligned with the direction that we're trying to go in? When you have a big project, big budgets, one of the key risks of failing are do people have the ability to ruthlessly prioritize to ensure that they're working on the things that move the needle that matters? Directional clarity. I call that like social influence, because that's an external influence that you're trying to have on the people around you. But this tracker also displays something that I call self-influence, which is that consistency of reflecting and continuously learning, reflecting and continuously learning, and that constant loop of being a continuous learner. He wasn't being instructed to do that. He was doing that because he realized that actually in the school of life, that's how you continue to adapt and evolve. And the third thing that ties the two together is this concept of human consciousness. The ability to be aware of oneself as well as one's surroundings. As a manager, we must exist in that duality, human consciousness. To be aware of what my strengths are, what my leadership spirit is, in order to be in a position to then nurture that in others. To be able to compartmentalize sometimes how I feel, what's going on in my personal life, in order to be truly present when supporting someone that needs my time and attention. This is not easy. This is not a technical skill. It takes deliberate practice, and unfortunately at work, we don't frame much of what we do as deliberate practice, yet we take that sporting analogy that we must seek high performance. But we're watching the World Cup right now. You train for 4 years before this moment to play in a World Cup. How much are we deliberately practicing at work? Human consciousness. It's a beautiful word, isn't it? So we're going to go into this portion now where we're going to start to discover your leadership spirit. I've been chatting at you quite a bit. Got you to do a few little activities and conversations. But now we're going to move on to the worksheet that I've actually placed on your table that some of you started writing on that you shouldn't have. So hopefully there's enough to go around. But what you'll see on this worksheet are some simple instructions. And I'm going to explain it step by step. I'm going to give you time to work on one step at a time. Okay? We're going to work on one step at a time. On the first page, beautifully formatted by Canva, we have step 1, which is going to involve solo reflection. I'm going to get a question on the screen in a second. For step 2, we're going to turn the sheet over. It's double-sided, environmentally friendly, a lot more friendly than the cloud computing and data centers that are plugging into AI right now. Just had to plug that in. All right. On number 2, step 2, we're going to work in pairs again. The same pairs that you were working with before that were sharing their manager story. Okay? And then step 3, we're going to go back to solo reflection and writing again. Does anyone have any questions about what I'm about to task you to do? Clear as mud or clear as day? All right, so question 1. I'm going to give you a few minutes for this. Solo writing. I just want you to write down, think about your memories, the 2 moments where you felt most alive as a leader. What are the 2 moments where you felt most alive as a leader? Think of one example, think of another. Okay? Just have a think, reflect, and then you can write that down. Right now, what's going through some people's minds is, have I ever felt alive as a leader? The next thing they think about is, but I'm not dead. And then the third thing is, oh my gosh, he's caught me. He's talking about me. Let me not give him eye contact. Don't worry, I'm going to come and guide. Let's turn the mics off for a second. Excellent. Excellent. So for those that have finished, can I just remind you that at the top of the sheet, you can actually write your name so that you know that this is your sheet of paper. That's quite an important step because in a moment, you're going to actually hand that piece of paper to your partner. Okay? So write your name at the top of the paper. Turn to your partner who you're going to entrust with your life and pass the sheet of paper over to your partner. They're going to turn it over and flip it onto side 2 for the second task, which I'm going to explain in a second. Okay? I know how complicated this is, but we have geniuses in this room, so I'm not worried. Excellent. So you're going to pass the piece of paper over. We've all done that. Excellent. Again, we're going to pass the piece of paper over to our partner. Okay? We've done that. Fantastic. All right. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to share, person A is going to share one of the stories that they wrote down, okay, when they've most felt alive. What's one story or an example when you most felt alive? You're going to share that with person B. Then I'm going to shout, hey, stop, swap. And then person B is going to do the same, give you their sheet of paper, and then you're going to have an opportunity to listen to them as they share that moment where they most have come alive. Now, if you have got your partner's paper, your job is to actively listen. To actively listen, it doesn't mean, oh, that happened to me too. It doesn't mean interrupting them at all. It means listening, shutting up, very difficult for us. Listening, especially for me. Listening, not saying a word, and I want you to write down all of the doing words. In primary school, we call those verbs. I want you to write down all of the verbs that you're hearing as they speak, okay? That's all you have to do. Listen to them share their story, write down all the verbs. I'm going to say swap, and we're going to reverse roles. Do we have any questions? Clear? Excellent. All right, let's commence. Okay, so if we've done this successfully, step 1, we listed 2 stories where we most felt alive as a leader. Step 2, we passed those sheets of paper over, and our partners graciously, kindly took notes of all of the verbs that were coming out as you were sharing. Now is the opportunity to hand that paper back so you can reflect on all of those verbs that have been written down. Okay? So in a moment, for step 3, you reflect on what's been written down. You can ask probing questions to your partner. What did you mean by that? What did I really say? I didn't remember saying that. You can have a conversation with your partner. And then step 3 is I want you to really pair, if this works, I want you to pair a verb with a noun. Okay? So we're trying to crystallize your first draft leadership spirit. So I want you to choose one of the verbs, and I want you to pair it with a noun on step 3. Okay? So, all right, while we get our technology working, what we're going to do is we're going to look at step 3. You're going to reflect on all of the verbs that have been written down, and you're going to pair it with a noun. But you can have a conversation with your partners to help you come up with the right language. All right, commence. Okay, so Jeff Bezos famously said that he writes his vision in ink and his strategy in pencil. I want you to ease a little bit of pressure off because there's no permanence to what you've just written down. I know you felt the pressure. I could see it as I was walking around. You've written it in pencil as a draft. You're going to iterate on it and evolve it and reflect on it over time to really get to the core of what your leadership spirit is. But it's out of curiosity. Who's written something that they feel really aligns with actually who they believe they are? Quite a few. Do we have a mic on this table? You had some nods there, so there's others that may agree. There you go.
Yeah, I didn't actually think that would actually come up. And I think it actually aligns with what I do. I'm the head of EDI. So I think for me what's important is seeing the people first, human-to-human level.
And what was the verb plus noun? What was the little phrase for you, the 2 words?
Seeing the person.
See the person. 3 words. But that's okay. That's good. That's good. But you know that's your leadership spirit, which is a real skill. Having someone that is consistently seeing the person for who they are. It's valuable, especially in your role. It's valuable for all leaders. Thank you. There's a few hands up on this table. Do we have a mic on that table? There's like 2 or 3 of you. I think.
My leadership spirit is pushing for success. Sorry, 3 words.
Wow, pushing for success. Wow. What was the context for that one? What was the story that came up just out of curiosity?
Everybody said we didn't need budget to update water quality models in Wales, and I thought it was a risk, so I pushed to get budget, sorted out an alternative payment plan, paid for it, and now Welsh Government are indebted to me.
So you're not afraid to go against the grain. Andrew says thank you. And we'll take one more. One more.
I've got battling injustice.
Battling injustice. We've got some warriors in this room. That's fantastic. And it's fantastic that you step into that courageously, because often we shy away from a fight. It's a very British thing to do, actually, to shy away from fights and arguments. Isn't it great when there's alignment with what you actually do in your work and what you actually feel is true for you? Can anyone guess what you think my one was? My leadership spirit, my genius. What do you think it could be? No swearing allowed. Sorry? Motivating master. For I do like that one. But it wasn't that, unfortunately. I should write that down, though. No, it wasn't motivating master. Seeing people. When I've got my glasses on, that would be an adequate one. But no, it was authentic connection. Authentic connection. And when I was in my 20s, I really undervalued it. I actually didn't like it because it didn't align for me to a job title. And all I wanted to desperately do when I was 22 is, guess what? Fit in. So when I've joined as a graduate into EY, prestigious management consulting, I didn't want to stick out at all. I just wanted to desperately fit in. So I was probably about 40% of my true self in that experience, rather than leaning into who I am and authentic connection. The thing that I didn't share between those two backpacking trips was that, sadly, my dad passed away at that time. And his death gave birth to me being a lot more courageous about being my most authentic self. That shortness of life reminded me that life is too short to be a restricted version of yourself. From that day onwards, I vowed that I'm going to be 100% my most authentic self in all that I do. And I think I've stuck true to that, even though I am a little bit quirky. I want to share one last story. At the beginning of this presentation, I spoke about people talking to their plants. But actually, this is a psychological study that was done around houseplants. And it took place in Arden House in Connecticut in the USA in 1976. And this controlled experiment was at a nursing home, where on one floor, the staff handed out houseplants. And they told all of the elderly people that they have the autonomy and choice to put the plants wherever they want, water them whatever time they want, and look after their plants how they see fit. On the other floor, the staff gave them houseplants, but said, don't worry, we'll look after the plants for you. 18 months later, they visited the nursing home, and they found that those that had the autonomy to look after the houseplants felt more connected, more alert, more sociable, and more alive. In fact, they actually realized that the mortality rates were different on the two floors. 15% of those who looked after the houseplants and had the autonomy passed away. 30% of those that didn't have any control passed away. So what does this really mean? When we talk about caring for houseplants in this example, what you notice is that those that had the care and responsibility felt a sense of aliveness because they had the autonomy to choose. They felt empowered to choose. They had more to connect on because they could choose. Those that didn't have the control and had the control taken away from them felt helpless. And that had an impact on their mental and physical health. So it goes back to what I said earlier, that how we feel really does impact how we perform. So we're getting towards the end of our workshop now together, a little keynote. Oh no, Andy, I'm enjoying it. I know. But we're going to have a few reflections as we close because I want to set you up for success this week. Our first one is we're going to write down a personal reflection, okay? What commitment are you going to make when you go back to your organization based on what you've experienced in this brief hour together? So I want you to reflect on what commitment you're personally going to make. I'm not going to ask you to play this back, actually. I want this to be your personal commitment. Okay, so have a think based on what you've experienced over this hour, some of the stories that we've shared, some of the things that have really stuck with you. What's going to shift when you go back? What are you going to commit to? Consider what type of conversations you feel you need to have. Consider what leading from your leadership spirit could look like if you're doing it more consistently. Okay, so as some of you wrap up those commitments, I'm going to bring a Slido up on the stage. So you have a QR code here that you can scan if you're managing to connect to the Wi-Fi. And I want you to answer a simple question with this Slido. I want you to share one-word reflections on how this experience had made you feel. I should have really tried to read it in Welsh, isn't it? I won't do that. Okay? Share a one-word reflection for how this experience made you feel. What's one word to sum it up for you? And the magic of Slido is going to work in a second, and we're going to see a word cloud appear on the screen. And I will take it personal. I'm joking. So your one-word experiences: motivated, reinvigorated, enthused, reflective, energized, empowered, curious, confident, guilty. That's an interesting one, but thank you for being honest. Quirky. I found my tribe. Emotional, appreciated, ready, alive. These are some great reflections to kick off the week, aren't they? No one said hot yet, or disturbed, or melting. This is the part where I should surprise everyone. We've got ice cream for everyone. I don't have that. Okay, what else do we have? Optimistic, challenging, inquisitive, developed, validated, reality check, boosted. They're still coming in. We'll collect these and maybe play these back as part of the summary, of course. But we can see some of the bigger word clouds there: empowered, reflective, and motivated. You see, one of the benefits of coming out to experiences like this is it gives us an opportunity to slow down and reflect so that we can start connecting dots, which is what you started to do today. Over the next 4 days, you've got an opportunity to really lean into this concept of what it means to have a leadership spirit, to reflect, to reconnect, but also to take practical experiences and stories back into your organizations. So if we can flick back to the slides for a second, and don't worry, we'll play that back to you so you have an opportunity to see that. I want to introduce you to a self-accountability framework that I want to encourage you to all do when you get back to your organizations. And you've got coaches on your table, so this is great because they can help to get you started. Within 3 days of leaving this experience, I want you to share what your key takeaways were with your team. Within 3 weeks of this experience, I want you to share what your personal commitment was with your team. And their job is to hold you to account, because in 3 months, I want you to go back to your team and ask them, and I want them to ask you, what worked well, what didn't work so well, and what am I going to do differently? This is obviously a useful framework for self-accountability across the board with what you do, but I want you to put it into action with the commitments that you're making today. So we've come to the end of our time together. I still get no sympathetic, oh no, we really enjoyed this, but that's fine. And now we're going to have roughly a 20 minutes break. 25-minute break. We're going to have a 25-minute break, okay? I sadly need to disappear, so I'm not going to be around for the 4 days, unfortunately. And I'm gutted, actually, because I want to get to know you all a lot more. So please do feel free to connect with me. How I am on stage is exactly how I am in person. The team can verify that. My namesake can verify that. So I am approachable, okay? So please do connect with me. And if you have any feedback, of course, please scan a QR code. I'm sure they're going to share feedback forms after as well. Thank you very much for having me, and have a brilliant week ahead.